Hello world, it's Vagabond and welcome to Kaliningrad, Russia's most isolated, westernmost and probably one of the most strategically important region. If you look on the map, you'll see that Kaliningrad Oblast does not have land access to the rest of the territory of Russia. So geographically, Kaliningrad is closer to any European country than to the rest of the territory of Russia. For example, it is 1 hour drive from here to Polish border, 1 hour drive to Lithuanian border. In 1946, having won the Second World War, Joseph Stalin, the ruler of the USSR, just decided that he needed some more seaports on Baltic Sea, and that's how he kinda annexed the territory, but at the same time it was finally recognized by the rest of the world. Before becoming a part of Russia, of USSR, it was the territory of Germany. The old name of Kaliningrad was Königsberg, and in 1946, after the attachment of this region to the territory of the USSR, it was named after Mikhail Kalinin, Soviet revolutionary that once was the head of Russia Socialist Republic, which was a state of USSR, which is effectively current Russia. It's actually a very interesting region because it's located literally in Europe. It's surrounded by Europe, surrounded by NATO. So it is not a secret that Kaliningrad was severely damaged during the Second World War. It was bombed, it was shelled by artillery, and therefore when the war ended there was a strong need in reconstruction of the city, and as soon as it was owned by Soviets, they just constructed these kind of simple blocks of flats, and that's why the general appearance of the city does not really differ from the rest of Russia. But some of the historical sites have been preserved in Kaliningrad region, like this gate of former Kaliningrad fortress. I would say that the sites that were preserved can be divided into two categories. The ones that were preserved just by chance, so they were not bombed, they were not damaged during the war. And the second category is the sites that were restored intentionally. There is still a lot of historical architecture in some of the buildings that existed here even before the war. They're still inhabited, but currently they coexist with this newly built stuff and some common blocks. So first thing that does not allow me to say that we are like in the very Europe are sidewalks. To be precise, their condition. Like there is a lot of holes, it's not really maintained, and it's easy to step in this hole at night because the street is barely illuminated, only the left side of the street. So there is quite a lot to do for the development of this area. Another historical site in the center of Kaliningrad, likely that these are also gates, so Kaliningrad Fortress, and these are the surrounds of this territory. We can even see some old pavement. It was paved by stones, and then they put the layer of asphalt on it, but asphalt destroyed, unlike stones. If you think that people around on the streets are German, then you are likely to be wrong, because Germans were deported from Königsberg within a couple of years after it was attached to Soviet Union. Probably Soviet administration was worried about the fact that Germans could organize revolution or kind of the rebellion and stay against Soviet power. So they not only deported people, they also tried to get rid of some, like let's say German names of settlements, of places. They renamed it on some communist or Russian manner. There is a lot of offices that issue Schengen visa in Kaliningrad. For example, this one issues Lithuanian visa because Kaliningrad borders Lithuania, and before the war in Ukraine started, a lot of people just went to Lithuania for shopping. Lithuanians at the same time came to Russia for the same purpose. So it was kind of a mutual exchange of potential customers, which was beneficial both for nearby countries and for Russia as well, those who live in this region. People living in border regions were able to visit Europe more often for educational, business or tourist purposes. For example, this is the next building to the one that issued visas, and it says like go to Europe for work. Like this company provided the whole opportunities to get the job in Europe. There is a piece of tram track that has been preserved, so this line does not really exist anymore, but there is still some tram service in Kaliningrad. And also look at the gauge, it's narrow gauge tram. This lovely place is called Lithuanian Creek. It was a moat, M-O-A-T, of Kaliningrad Fortress. So it's a part of the fortress, a part of the fortification that split the fortress with the rest of the territory around. There is also an interesting system of gateways on this Lithuanian Creek. This is one of the gateway. You see, water there is higher than here. I've just discovered that massive wall on the left of the creek is a wall of a bastion, a part of Kaliningrad fortification system that was constructed in the very middle of 19th century. And there is its name probably, Bastion Grolman. What bastion is like a defensive wall of a fortress. So this is the first part of the fortress that experiences an assault. So I thought that it would be too easy to just walk around the bridge, so I decided to literally get across it, following this massive pipe for the water of this creek. So when level of water increases, it starts flowing straight here. Rosgarten Gate, one of the 8 surviving gates of the city of Kaliningrad, former Königsberg, also built in 19th century. I also noticed that there is a lot of German Mercedeses on the streets of Kaliningrad. The majority of them are age-old, but they still operate on city routes. But some buses are Russian, so there is a gradual replacement of all German stuff going on, but still some interesting examples can be found. I also like the way they paved bus stop. Its pavement is different from the one on the main road. It's paved by stone. There is Kaliningrad tram, Czech Tatra, with the gauge of 1000 millimeters. There are also 2 lakes in Kaliningrad, upper and lower one. There is the panorama on upper lake with pedestrian zone around. Do like the view from here, the embankment. There is a very interesting and very tiny monument in Kaliningrad. There is the Amber Museum, and on the entrance to this museum is such a tiny figurine which is called Hamlin. Hamlin is a local name of Domnovo, a character of Slavic mythology, which is kind of the spirit that lives at people's home. It's responsible for the peace inside. Do you notice that the number of trees in Kaliningrad are covered with this yellow tape? This tape was designed to deal with chestnut moth. Look, all of these trees are chestnuts and they are hit by moth that eats it somehow. So to deal with it, local authorities decided to somehow save trees by rolling this tape around them, so it's kinda sticky. Kaliningrad is actually a sprawling city. Its population is 500,000 people and it's gradually increasing, unlike many regions of Russia. So even in 2021, when the majority of Russian cities experienced decrease in population, Kaliningrad, on the other hand, experienced its increase. People from different regions of Russia, particularly from some remote ones in Siberia, maybe some northern territories, come here. Well, obviously a lot of them went here with the purpose of being able to travel to Europe, because it's very close to here, and also having local registration is likely to have an opportunity to easier issue Schengen visas. But who knew what's gonna happen in 2022? Now it doesn't make any sense because Europe is closed, I mean nearby Europe for Kaliningradians. But it's still possible to get both to Poland and Lithuania from here being Russian citizens if you have a residence permit in one of the European Union countries. In this case, Poland, Lithuania and some other countries, they allow the citizens of Russia to enter. Some more gates of the same architecture and some more figurines of Hamlins. There is actually a family of them in the city. They appeared just 5 years ago, so it was the startup of local artists and it turned out to be a very successful startup. So they placed these kind of figurines in different parts of the city and now tourists and locals enjoy them. As a fan of rail transport, I evidently like the fact that they preserved these old tram tracks in different places of the city, because their tram is unique just by the fact that the gauge of the tracks is different from the rest of the country. It definitely would be better if trams separated in this area. Seems to be a local flea market where people sell different kind of stuff. Simple but nice German architecture of the early 20th century. What differs these houses from the rest ones in Russia is tile roof. It's very widespread in Europe that mansards are inhabited, but pretty unusual for the mainland of Russia. Usually between upper floor of the building and its roof there is just empty space, but here they use all of the space they had. This is one of the numerous museums of Kaliningrad. There is the fountain, and in this pond you can find a number of Japanese carps. Look, there they are. Such massive orange and pink fishes. It doesn't look as business center, however it is Kaliningrad business center in the very heart of the city. Pretty much all of the buildings here are so European, particularly this one with such interesting construction on its roof. Let's check this out. Funny fact that this masterpiece of architecture turned out to be the main department of FSB of Kaliningrad region. Most of the street signs are translated to English, so you will not get lost here. Okay, I'm finally having breakfast. Let's taste local food of Kaliningrad. Found such a lovely bistro and ordered this kind of stuff for just $3.5. So I ordered a plate of buckwheat porridge with 2 massive sausages, 4 pancakes with, it's a jam, let's say, cherry compote, and 1 boiled egg. Such a lovely building of Kaliningrad State Technical University, Volkswagen, and blooming flowers. What can be better? It was difficult to notice this one, the third figurine in my collection. There is the girl sitting on snail. It's barely visible from the street. If I didn't point this place on my map, I would definitely miss it. It looks like a Catholic cathedral, but in fact, it used to be an orphanage. Constructed in 1900, it housed 50 orphans. But currently there is the head office of the central bank. Figurine number 4 is just sunbathing, enjoying the sun of Kaliningrad. Well, it's high time to take a local tram. Let's get back to the city center and explore the main sites of Kaliningrad. Okay, I've just bought the ticket. It cost 28 rubles, very cheap. I used this green terminal for that purpose. The tram is pretty noisy. We are at central square of Kaliningrad, and behind me is the abandoned building of the House of Soviets. It was supposed to be the administration of Kaliningrad region. Its construction began in Soviet Union and ended with its dissolution. Since then, this building has not been completely constructed and remained in more or less the same condition as it is right now. The construction of House of Soviets began on the ruins of ancient Kaliningrad castle, but to be precise, on the place where used to be the moat of this castle. So there used to be a pretty marshy soil, and nobody knew about it apparently before the construction started, so it didn't make any sense to continue constructing it. And this building was abandoned for more than 30 years, and only 5 days ago they finally decided to demolish this building and probably construct something different instead of it. I remember that 3 years ago I photographed this building from the exactly same spot, and nothing really changed aside from the construction site that appeared around it. But it's not construction, it's rather say demolition site. We are on the embankment of Pregola River, the main water artery of Kaliningrad. Okay, we are now enjoying Königsberg Cathedral, the most significant preserved building of Königsberg, which was, by the way, largely destroyed in World War II. Its construction was officially completed in 1380. It was a Catholic church until 1544, then it became Lutheran church. It was largely bombed in 1944 and remained destroyed until the dissolution of the USSR. And right next to this cathedral is the memorial grave of Immanuel Kant. He was a German philosopher and one of the Central Enlightenment thinkers, one of the most influential person in modern Western philosophy. And now let's take a look at the district called Fish Village, built up with modern buildings in an architectural style that imitates the architecture of pre-war Königsberg. Until Germany lost control of Königsberg in the Second World War, fishermen lived and traded their catch in the so-called Fish Village, also known as Fish Market.
However, the new fish village and the old fish village have almost nothing in common, as they were located in different places. The new fish village is situated east of Knipehof Island that houses Kaliningrad Cathedral. But actual village of the fishermen was located north of the island, closer to the old town, in the area where the House of Soviets was supposed to be constructed. The modern-day district of Fish Village includes residential and business areas, restaurants, cafes and a zone for pedestrians on the river embankment.
There is also an opportunity to take a boat excursion around Kaliningrad. Some of them even reach its main seaport, so you will be able to see the main sights of the city from water, which is kind of the unique perspective. It's kind of a regular street of Kaliningrad, but on the left you see there is some kind of a hill, and behind this door are either storages of fortification or a shelter that can be used to protect local citizens in case of bombing or stuff.
Indeed, behind the door there was a bomb shelter. I even managed to find photos of its inside out. Well, there were some spare parts of a car, pieces of furniture and some trash.
Just found the monument for the friendship of Soviet and Polish nation. Sounds so surreal considering current political attitude of Poland towards Russia and of Russia towards Poland.
Having visited the monument, I went to the concert hall of the Kaliningrad Philharmonic, situated in the building of the German neo-Gothic Church of the Holy Family, built in 1907. Before the Second World War, the church functioned properly. The church was damaged during the war and consequently abandoned for years. In 1980, after a lengthy reconstruction, the Kaliningrad Philharmonic was opened in the church building. After the reconstruction, they installed organ in the church, which makes it a popular destination for listeners of organ music.
And now let's have a look at Kaliningrad main railway station, opened in 1929. There is such a massive coat of arms of Soviet Union. We are at the railway station of Kaliningrad. There are 6 platforms, and there is just one platform, number 6. So it was built here to accept trains from Poland, because this track, you see, its cross ties are different. They're metal one, and this is the track on European gauge, 1435 millimeters. This is the broad gauge, 1520 millimeters. Basically, this railway track is no longer in use, but in zeros at the beginning of this century, of 21st century, it was still possible to see some trains arriving to this track. Such an interesting thing in form of the arch is the centralization post of Königsberg railway, former centralization post. Currently there is a control and measuring point of signaling and communication of Kaliningrad railways. I moved to the very outskirts of Kaliningrad to check one of the abandoned forts. Fort number 8, named after the King Frederick I. It was built in 1882. It was used both during the First and the Second World War. It covered both highway and the railway that led to the Polish city of Elbląg. Okay, I'm entering the fort, so let's see how deep can we get inside. I don't really have a bulb or the light, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to explore it. The assault on the fort began on April 7 with artillery shelling and an attack of flamethrowers. The battle was short, and the same day the fort had capitulated. German soldiers surrendered, so Soviet army captured a lot of their ammunition, fuel and supplies. There is another entrance. It looks pretty terrifying. That's why we get inside. There is such an interesting passage that slightly inclined downwards, which means that we go downhill steadily but slowly. At some point passages are slightly damaged. Actually, the further I go, the more destroyed the passage seems to be. So let's see how deep I'll be able to get. Soon we'll reach the water, most likely. Yeah, we reached the water. There it is, look. So it's obviously better to explore such constructions with powerful flashlight or visit museums where things are illuminated, but this is not the museum, this is the wild fort. There are a couple of forts that are maintained in Kaliningrad. I will visit them probably So before visiting them, I just decided to see how it is like in its natural environment.
Fort number 8 was blocked on the first day of the assault on Königsberg on April 6, 1945. The commandant of the fort left the Soviet command's proposal to capitulate without reaction, so Soviet soldiers began the assault on April 7 with artillery shelling and an attack by flamethrowers. The battle for the fort was short, and the fort capitulated on the same day. At that time, 150 German soldiers and officers surrendered, and a number of trophies were captured by Soviet troops as a result of the assault. Traces of artillery shells can still be found on the territory of the fort.
This is the hole remained after that. That's incredible.
The next morning I went on a short trip to southern areas of Kaliningrad region. I took a bus to the village of Vladimirovo, also known as Tharau. The first mention of Tharau dates back to 1315. In the mid-13th century, a Lutheran church was built here, which was the main purpose of my visit to the village. On January 28, 1945, the village was taken by Soviet troops, and in 1947 it was renamed Vladimirovo.
Pavement of one of the streets on the outskirts of the village has been preserved pretty well. So we are approaching the church. There it is. So there is the church of Saint Catherine, constructed in 1350. So after the end of the Second World War, the church remained intact. Later, the organ was dismantled, the bells were thrown down, the tiled roof was broken, as a result of which the church began to deteriorate. In the 1970s, the church was used as a warehouse for storing various chemical fertilizers. In subsequent years, spot repairs of the church was carried out by Russian and German enthusiasts. And in 2010, the church was owned by Russian Orthodox Church. So as a result of conservation, all of the entrances to the church were blocked. There used to be the main entrance, the original ceramic brick. This is a new one. It even sounds differently. I think this is the only view I can get without actually entering the church. So barely visible, but interior is still recognizable. It's probably possible to get inside this church if ask somebody for the keys for the lock. They are probably available in a local museum, but museum is closed at the moment, and I only have 15 minutes to explore this church, because then I'll need to go to the train and move to a different town. But there is gonna be more churches on our way, and I will probably get inside some of them. A number of serious World War II battles happened on this land, and even more local fightings happen here. Like, I'm walking this road and it seems that in a couple of seconds a Soviet, or I don't know, a German tank will just appear from the curve. Okay, I made it to the railway platform from where I'm going to take the train to the next town. There is such a lovely German house that is still inhabited. There are only 2 floors. Inside doesn't look so pretty, but also there is the underground floor, and from here you can enter the gardens, for example. This is the brick with some German mark. Look, interesting one. Здравствуйте. So this is underground floor, which is uninhabited. Most likely it was used for storing some corn, maybe some agricultural stuff. Finally got to the railway platform, 18 kilometers to Kaliningrad. Such a peaceful area. Would be nice to do some rail finding here. Also, the railway traffic doesn't seem to be super heavy. Wow, it's a $1 train. I mean, the whole route from Kaliningrad to Bagrationovsk cost just 80 rubles for close to 30 kilometers. There is a tiny settlement which is used as dachas by local Kaliningradians. Dozens of babushkas left the train here. We are in the town of Bagrationovsk, former German name Preußisch Eylau. Its population is 6,500 people. Let's see what's interesting is here. Bagrationovsk is the southernmost town of Kaliningrad region. It is located right after the border with Poland. So it's less than 5 kilometers to Polish territory, but there is no border crossing. There is also no railway connection with Poland. In the past, in times of Königsberg, there used to be one. That's why we can get to Poland, even by train. Actually, this town has very rich history because not only Second and the First World War went through here, but also some Napoleon wars. And there was a famous Battle of Preußisch Eylau.
The Battle of Preußisch Eylau took place on February 7, 1807 during the Napoleonic Wars. This battle was part of the War of the Fourth Coalition against Napoleon. The Fourth Anti-French Coalition consisted of Prussia, Russia, Great Britain, Sweden and Saxony. The Battle of Preußisch Eylau was the bloodiest battle of the Fourth Coalition. According to various sources, a total of 30 to 54,000 soldiers died on both sides. As a result, the battle ended in a draw.
Well, I found some German constructions on the railway station. I think that it used to be a dispatcher tower or something. This barely visible sign, it's the abbreviation of Preußisch Eylau, German name of the settlement. This building is currently owned by Russian Railways, and it says that this one is for sale. Well, this territory looks pretty German, with some Russian-like modernization.
On the outskirts of Bagrationovsk there is a monument dedicated to the Battle of Preußisch Eylau. The Battle of Preußisch Eylau showed that Russia and its allies were resolute in resisting the French advance. This bolstered coalition morale and paved the way for future military actions.
There is a German water tower constructed in 1913. I heard that it's still active, although it doesn't seem to be active. Also, this water tower could be used as observation one. Probably from the top it is possible to see the territory of Poland, which is in just 2 kilometers from this place. I'm hearing the sound of drilling, which is a very good sign. It means that something is being reconstructed. Not something, but the castle of Preußisch Eylau, constructed in 13th century. It used to be a warehouse back to Soviet Union. Then this building was abandoned for many years, and just last year, in 2022, it was sold to, let's say, to some private investor who apparently decided to create a hotel or something inside. I switched the location to a tiny town of Gvardeyskoye, 30 kilometers south of Kaliningrad. Behind me is another German church, the Church of Saint Anna. After the war, it was one of the most well-preserved German churches in Kaliningrad region, and it seems that we are able to get inside as well. Interesting to know that the clocks on this tower show Moscow time, but not local one, so they are 1 hour ahead of real time. It's 12:30 now, but not 1:30.
Фотография 1930 года, это панорама, общий вид кирхи. Алтарной части и вот где мы с вами стоим. Это карта Восточной Пруссии, 1584 год. Здесь мы живем с вами. Первый картограф Восточной Пруссии был Каспар Хейненберг, священник этой кирхи. И делал он ее на дереве в течение 15-20 лет. Это кирхи довоенные нашего Багратионского района, но они утрачены, их не существует. У нас только с того времени 2 кирхи. Это и во Владимирово, которое вы видели. Доски на черном росписи. Это середина 14 века, 15. Все по-разному говорят.
In the afternoon, I returned to Kaliningrad and continued to explore local attractions. I went to fort number 11, also known as Fort Dönhoff, the only one of the 15 forts in Kaliningrad that has been preserved almost in its original form, because it was not significantly damaged during the Second World War. The system of Königsberg fortifications was built in 70s and 80s of the 19th century to protect the Königsberg castle. The so-called fortification ring totally included 15 forts. The Fort Dönhoff capitulated during the Soviet assault on Königsberg, offering virtually no resistance. After the capture of Königsberg by Soviet troops, Soviets allocated their military base in the fort, and Russian military contingent remained in the fort until the year of 2014. Soon after military left the fort, it was bought by some private investors that turned the fort into the museum. I went on a guided tour around the fort to better understand how the fortifications were exploited. During the excursion, I learned many features of the fortifications construction, which were a separate video. So, if you ever visit Kaliningrad, do not hesitate to visit this fort.
Открывается солдат, начиная крутить рукоять, заставлял в движение центральный боковик. В это время тросовая часть крутилась и помогала вернуть одну чашу вниз с арсенала, а вторую поднять наверх, на третий этаж крепости. За счет этого получалось достичь бесперебойной доставки боеприпасов на третий этаж форта.
After exploring the fort, I went to the Kaliningrad Cathedral to enjoy the sound of largest organ in Russia. Organ music concerts are held in the cathedral every day and attract hundreds of people. When I made it to the cathedral, I realized how popular tourist destination Kaliningrad actually was. Almost every seat was taken and I could barely find a free bench. Organ music is generally beautiful, but 20 minutes into the concert it started to bore me. Nevertheless, it was a pleasure for me to listen to organ music, because before visiting Kaliningrad I had heard the organ only once, when I by chance ended up at the celebration of Christmas in Munich, Germany.
Alright, it's high time to check grocery prices in Kaliningrad. We are currently in Spar store. This is not the cheapest, but also not the most expensive store. Cheapest kind of apples would cost 80 rubles. There are different kinds of tomato. I guess these ones are local and also the most expensive, 330 rubles per kilo. And there are the cheapest ones for 190. So bottled milk costs approximately 80 to 100 rubles. Packeted milk costs twice less, 44. 59. Cheese would be approximately 800 rubles or 600 with some discounts. Various kind of sausages, price is also different, starting from 200 and up to 470. The cheapest loaf of bread costs 25 rubles, or another one for 29.32. 1 kilo meal, 70 rubles. A pack of Italian spaghetti, 450 grams, 100 rubles. Some Russian alternatives are even cheaper for 65 and 75 rubles. They serve rice for 500 grams and an average price of it is 100 rubles. Here we come to tomato sauce. Heinz, world famous one. This big package for 110 rubles. Russian alternative is even cheaper, 75 rubles. Chocolate. This is German one, Ritter Sport, 154, but this one is usually one of the most expensive. These are Milkas, they are cheaper for just 100, and the cheapest one for 70. Alpengold, it's a Russian brand. Here we come to cans. This is a beef can, the big one, 500 grams, 275, so 1 kilo would cost 550. 1.5 liters of water, 60 rubles. There is a lot of energy drinks and iced tea. Well, they are mostly local, but there is the original Coca-Cola. Let's check this out. It's either Serbian or Polish. Yeah, it's produced in Serbia, and this is also Serbian Fanta. 140, 150, slightly expensive, but it's still available in the store, as you can see. There is food for cats, starts from 20 up to 25 rubles per one package of Whiskas, let's say, not even 25, 24. Alcohol prices are so different, I don't know, I think the average would be, let's say 5, 6, maybe 700 rubles per one bottle of wine. 1 liter of Russian standard vodka, 850. Another early morning in Kaliningrad, 5 a.m. Look at the weather peculiarities. At first glance it seems that there is gonna be a heavy rain from Poland, probably from that side. Hopefully I will not be hit by that. I made it to a tiny village of Chekhovo, former German name Underwangen. There is a lovely German church located nearby, and also some other interesting German constructions that I have already noticed. Noticeable architecture of the private house looks like a German architectural style Fachwerk. First, I'd like to pay your attention on this lovely German mill constructed in 1916. It used to operate as a mill, then it was closed for a long time. Upper parts of this construction were abandoned, and on the first floor there were some kind of grocery stores. There is a very nice brick pipe on the backyard of the mill, and also it seems that I found the entrance. Apparently the entrance to the mill itself is closed, and this is kind of the grocery store that used to be here. This electricity construction also looks very interesting. I bet this one was also German and it's still operating. This village looks less remarkable than previous ones that I visited. People plant vegetables here. I see potato and onions. There is a huge mass grave of Soviet soldiers that died on 26th of January 1945 fighting for this village with Germans. It's just incredible how many of them died at just one day. Well, yeah, they managed to get this village. Back then it was called Underwangen, it had German name. 2 years later, in 1947, it was renamed into Chekhovo, being named after famous Russian writer Anton Chekhov. This is the memorial to the victims of that fighting, of that battle. There used to be a local school. It was opened in 1897 and closed in 2007. But according to the current state of the building, it's hard to imagine that just 15 years ago it was operational. And here is the local church that was constructed in 14th century. It survived the Second World War, was barely damaged. But then, in the 80s of 20th century, it was intentionally destroyed by locals. I don't know why, because of the anti-religious ideology in Soviet Union, or just because of lack of the construction materials, because I heard that locals actively used bricks that were used in the construction of this church for their personal use. There must have been cemetery near the church, but it disappeared. This is a part of the grave, probably. Yeah, that's an extremely powerful and well-protected wall. Just took a bus to another nearby village and found such an incredible bus stop designed in mosaic. So it must be Soviet mosaic.
I moved to the long-suffering village of Domnovo. I've called it long-suffering because over its long history it was destroyed and rebuilt several times under different circumstances. The first settlement on the site of the modern settlement of Domnovo, in German Domnau, appeared in 1249, during the era of the Knights of the Teutonic Order. For the first 2 centuries of its existence, the settlement gradually developed and acquired the features of a medieval town. In 1458, during the war between the Teutonic Order and the Prussian Union, Domnau was captured and completely burned. Then, in 1520, Domnau was captured again and burned by the Poles during the Polish-Teutonic War. The city was restored and inhabited by the second half of the 16th century. In 1571, a severe fire destroyed the entire city along with the castle and church. Fires also raged in Domnau in 1659, 1681 and 1776. During the fighting of the First World War, Domnau was destroyed by 65%, but reconstructed in 2 years. The last time the village suffered serious damage was the Second World War, when it was captured by the Soviet army on January 30, 1945. After the war, the German population of Domnau was deported to Germany. Germans were replaced by settlers from the USSR, but the population of the modern-day Domnovo has never reached pre-war levels.
That's the first time I see this kind of ads in Kaliningrad townships. They try to encourage the local male population to
join Russian army. It would be more exciting to sneak into the church with the preserved decoration on walls with some interior, but it's barely possible in this area, I think. It seems that the majority of churches are in this condition, that they are either completely dilapidated, ruined, or just empty inside. It's likely that one day this church will be reconstructed, but at the moment it's just like bare walls. Oh look, it seems that I found the way up. Let's see how far we can get following the staircase. Wow, this is the next floor of the church. Oh yeah, that is the maximum. Look. I think I will try to hitchhike to the next town. The distance is fairly short, so I will definitely catch the ride. There is such a lovely road surrounded by trees, and trees are marked with this reflecting yellow light to drive through at night. Welcome to the lovely town of Pravdinsk. There are several places of interest I'm going to visit. I didn't really expect to find it, but this is the German fire hydrant. It's also active, so it can be used even now. Waldenburg Armaturer Fabrik. I think the architecture of water towers in Kaliningrad region is as remarkable as the architecture of German churches. This one was constructed in 1924 and it was in use until 2012. It would be a very nice tourist attraction with the panoramic viewpoint, but for some reasons it's not in use at all right now. There is pretty unremarkable Soviet house of culture, but what is remarkable in this construction is this lovely Soviet mosaic. The composition consists of mosaic panels and 3 figures of women symbolizing literature, music and painting. I've almost missed 2 important details of this mosaic. The first one on the left depicts the Battle of Friedland, and this part on the right shows new Soviet settlers. Apparently in the past this museum was often visited not only by locals and Russian tourists, but also by German and Polish ones, according to the sign in 3 languages: Russian, German and Polish. German kindergarten with the spire in the middle is still working. There's also the memorial to dead Russian soldiers who died during Friedland battle. Friedland is the German name of this town of Pravdinsk. This was the part of Napoleon Wars. The monument is still here. The fortified city of Friedland was founded in 1312 on the site of an old Prussian settlement. This place is known for a Friedland battle that took place on June 14, 1807 between Russian and French armies during the War of the Fourth Coalition. During this war, Russia tried to protect its ally Prussia. Before the Battle of Friedland, Napoleon failed to defeat the Russian army, but near Friedland the Russian army was forced to retreat, losing from 10 to 25,000 people. The Battle of Friedland led to the conclusion of treaties of Tilsit that I will describe a bit later in the video. The main attraction of Pravdinsk is the St. George Church, founded in 1313. At first it was a Catholic, later a Protestant church, and in 1990 the church was assigned to the Russian Orthodox Church. Today it is one of the largest operating churches in the Kaliningrad region. The church's bell tower offers panoramic views of the city. By the way, officers of the Russian army monitored the progress of the Battle of Friedland from exactly the same point on the bell tower. But in the previous village that I visited, I saw the church. You remember, the one that was empty inside, but these numerous wooden balks. So that was just the structure of the church. By the way, the bell was made in 1729, so 300 years ago. I'm continuing exploring Kaliningrad region, and it seems that I have found the most peculiar church of Königsberg. But to be precise, the ruins of the church, because that's it, it's just the bell tower, and the rest of the church just does not exist anymore. Currently the population of this village roughly exceeds, I don't know, 20 people, maybe even less. In the past the population of this place was 300 people. Here used to be the narrow gauge railway that was running to Pravdinsk, the town from where I come here. The church was the cultural center of the settlement, but after the war, during the Soviets, it was dismantled. Likely that locals used
the bricks from this church as construction materials here, maybe in some other nearby villages. Okay, let's check the theoretical possibility of climbing on top from the inside. No, it's completely impossible. Just look how bad this building is. We are entering another German corner, or maybe not entering because it's closed, but according to the appearance of this building, I doubt that somebody lives here. Maybe only from this side. Well, in some places of Kaliningrad region, hitchhiking works pretty well. That was the third time in a row when I hitched the first car. Now I'm heading towards the next interesting spot. This is one of the 4 hydroelectric power plants of the town of Pravdinsk. Despite such a significant amount of hydroelectric power stations, they're pretty small. This is the river that is called Lava. It originates in Poland and flows across Kaliningrad region. This power plant is considered abandoned, which means that it does not produce electricity. It only creates an artificial obstacle on the way of water of this river. And that's it. I switched the location, took another bus and ended up in the town of Железнодорожный, which might be translated as railway town. So there is the railway that runs to Poland, and probably this town was named after it. But I'm not here for the purpose of telling you about the railway. I'm here to show you the town itself, because this is one of the most actively renovated town in Kaliningrad region, and currently this is the town of contrast because of it. Prior to the active renovation, it was one of the most dilapidated places in the region. That's why we see what we see. Completely restored, wonderful villas coexist with these ruins. It's kind of an interesting situation. Soon these ruins will be turned into these lovely villas, but this process is still going on. It's gonna take probably some years to completely restore the whole town. This is old Ratusha, so old town hall of the city. So they're planning to create some kind of the hotel here, and it must be a very expensive hotel. It's also very close to Polish border, so technically when borders are open, it would be easy for Polish people to come here, or for those Russians who go to Poland. It's a very nice location. It has a great potential. I hope the renovation will finally be completed. Accidentally found German memorial cemetery. It's quite unremarkable comparing to Soviet and Russian ones. German church of Железнодорожный was built in the same period as the previous churches that I have already shown you. In 14th century, in Soviet Union, it wasn't used as a church. There was a storage of some goods, then it was a house of culture, some kind of cultural center. And then I see that there are some restoration works going on, and perhaps they will completely reconstruct this church and back it to life, either in form of the museum or, I don't know, maybe Orthodox, maybe Catholic cathedral. We'll see. The area around church is also getting better. There is a newly built children's playground, some renovated houses, but not all of them have been developed yet. But there is still a lot of work.
I'm not going to say much about Железнодорожный. The year of the foundation of the town is considered to be 1325, the year when Gvardeyskoye castle was consecrated. Like other Prussian settlements, Железнодорожный, formerly known as Gvardeyskoye, gradually grew and developed. During the Second World War, the city suffered significant damage. Active restoration works in the town began only a few years ago. By the way, the Gvardeyskoye castle that was known for being a veterinary hospital during the Soviet years has not been reconstructed yet. Now you see the condition of the castle stables on the screen.
A clearer seat. Completely ruined, but also the place with the great potential, particularly because of its location close to Polish border. Well, in case borders are open, tourists from, not necessarily from Poland, but from other European countries that travel to Kaliningrad can easily visit it.
Ну, для инструкции для сеялки, да?
Not far from Железнодорожный there is an interesting engineering structure that was never fully put into operation. In front of you is the upper lock of the Masurian Canal, which was supposed to connect the Great Masurian Lakes in Poland with the Baltic Sea. There have been discussions about building a canal since the 17th century, but the project was finally approved only in 1907 by the Prussian parliament. Construction of the 50-kilometer canal began in April 1911. However, in 1914, all works stopped due to the outbreak of the First World War. Construction of the canal resumed only in 1920, but was soon interrupted again due to the severe economic crisis and hyperinflation that erupted in Germany. Work on the Masurian Canal resumed again in 1934 after the National Socialists came to power in Germany. With the outbreak of the war with the Soviet Union, construction of the canal slowed down due to a lack of construction materials and labor, and in 1942, after the beginning of Soviet offensive, it was completely seized. At the beginning of 1945, the Wehrmacht blew up almost all the bridges across the canal during the retreat caused by Soviet offensive. But the canal's locks, security gates and dams in areas filled with water remained untouched. After the end of the Second World War and the surrender of Germany at the Potsdam Conference in 1945, the territory of East Prussia was divided between the Soviet Union and Poland, which led to the division of the canal. Later, the restoration of the Masurian Canal was considered unprofitable both by Soviet Union and Poland.
So I moved to the town of Znamensk, another settlement in Kaliningrad region. There is the Eternal Fire and another mass grave with more than 1,000 names of Soviet soldiers. All of these people died in the result of just one battle, one fighting. There are different dates of death, but probably some of them were just injured initially and then died in hospitals. I've just sneaked on the huge territory of the abandoned psychiatric hospital. It was used by Soviet military forces as well. Currently it's just like a huge ghost town, but with such an incredible architecture. I'm trying to speak quietly because I know that it's not really a super restricted area, but it must be secured at some point.
The abandoned mental hospital Allenberg is one of the most mysterious places in Kaliningrad region. It was built in the 50s of 19th century in the pseudo-Gothic style. There is no doubt that such architecture adds gloom and mystery to this place. In the best years, so to speak, up to 1,400 patients were kept here. At the beginning of the Second World War in 1940, the hospital was closed and the Nazi garrison was stationed on its territory. In 1945, Soviet troops took Königsberg, kicked off Germans and placed a Soviet military base instead. Russian military abandoned the base in 2013. And since then, the territory of the former mental hospital has been abandoned.
This mental facility was huge, way bigger than I expected. Actually, it could take several hours to explore it, but I have only like 30 minutes before the sunset. Before exploring this area, I only had experience in exploring Soviet ghost towns, but the architecture here is completely different. It's just uncomparable. Look at this beauty. That is the railway that connects Kaliningrad with the rest of the world. It runs through Lithuania, then through Belarus, enters Russia. To my surprise, the waiting hall of the train station is open. I thought that it was closed, but not. I think I will try to overnight here, and tomorrow early in the morning continue moving and exploring Kaliningrad region. Good morning. I have successfully spent the night in the train station. This is the way I slept, literally on the floor. Because they put such disgusting chairs to prevent people from sleeping on them. But I still had some nap, which is very good. I put some of my clothes under my ass to prevent it from being frozen. And let me tell you that it was slightly cold at night, but not super cold. So sometimes I had some nap, sometimes I was awake. So the time is 5:30 a.m. I think I'll just brush my teeth and then go to the next town. Luckily the weather is still okay. It's not going to rain next days. At least I can continue my crazy adventures around Königsberg. There is a nice German bridge with such kind of arches over the river that also flows across Kaliningrad. And currently I'm exiting the settlement and going to start hitchhiking towards next town. Welcome to the small town of Ozyorsk. There is not that much peculiarities aside from this massive church constructed in middle 19th century, which is also abandoned and its hall is inaccessible for visitors. Я хотел спросить, вы давно здесь живете?
Родился тут.
А когда вы родились? Это какие года?
Ой, 50-е года.
50-е. А вы можете рассказать, каким город был тогда?
Ну, немножко другим, конечно.
Немецким, чисто немецким был.
Тут булыжник, площадь, все тут булыжник. Немецкий.
Все, булыжник, домики стояли с мансардами немецкие.
Еще немецкая будка там стояла.
Да.
Ну, полицейский.
А вы живете в немецких домах, получается?
Ну, настроили, да, конечно.
Ну, я в немецком.
Реставрацию сделали.
А известно ли вам, кем были вообще предыдущие владельцы дома?
Нет.
К вам они не заявлялись впоследствии?
Живых там их давно.
Не, ну, как-то в 80-х еще так, когда
Приезжали.
границы были открыты, то приезжали старые. Тут много приезжало, много. Даже на автобусах приезжали, на машинах приезжали.
Да, я как раз слышал много историй, то что немцы, которые, были выселены отсюда, они впоследствии приезжали, кто-то просто так поностальгировать, посмотреть.
Ну да, вспомнить чего-то. Когда-то жил тут, а теперь вы живете.
Кирха, а до каких годов она работала?
Ой, я еще в школе учился,
Мы
часы
пацанами
шли.
были, там все было цело.
Ой, колокол
Все
звенел.
целое было.
Всё
Часы
целое.
ходили, колокол был.
И
Это
рисунки.
иконостас был, все
Да.
вот это вот. Орган, конечно, увезли, орган целый был. Его куда-то увезли в музей. Когда техникум, это все там.
Да, ну,
Весь
склад.
план туда
Склад
взяли, и вот она начала потихоньку затухать.
А ее сейчас огородили, планируют восстанавливать?
Ну, хотели,
Немножко восстановили там.
а денег-то с немцами сейчас плохо живем. Евро, как сделали?
Вместе с немцами должны были, да, работать?
Немцы, да, ну,
Они хотели
финансировали.
восстановить старые, кто жили здесь, потомки остались, они хотели. У них же тут и деды похоронены, там склепы внизу идут, эти несколько этажей.
А как вообще изменилась жизнь в области с закрытием границ в прошлом году?
А как?
Никак, хуже намного.
Вон, зайди в магазин, посмотри, как
На
эти-
цены, да.
Да, на цены. Тут
Даже
всё
реклама по телевизору, у нас бананы как в Сибири там
Да.
стоят, на Камчатке, по такой цене. Ну, все паром привозят, это все выкидывают.
А
Пенсии
живем на рыбе. Море рядом, заливы рядом. А зайди в магазин, посмотри, ничего нет. С продуктами очень тяжело стало.
И привозят сейчас из России в основном?
На
Или
пароме.
из других каких-то?
Ну, есть
На
тут
пароме.
фермеры
Литва-то
регионов.
закрыла, уже ни самолетами никак не проехать.
Раньше-то свободно в Польшу ездили, свободно в Литву ездили.
В Польшу сигареты возили, водку возили. Ну,
Продукты там.
И поляки тоже приезжали сюда.
да, да.
Ой, полно приезжало. Заправиться, тут еще.
Заправляться-то сюда ездили. Там все-таки топливо подороже, чем здесь. Жили, в то время жили лучше. Ну, это лет 10-15 назад. Да.
После распада Союза в лучшую сторону как жизнь изменилась?
Никак.
Никак.
Худшую. Здесь худшую. Мы просто, как бы сказать, на отшибе. Работы тут нету. Молодежь какого занимается, кто таксует, раньше в Польшу ездили, привозили, продавали, работы практически нет. А
Которые
сейчас еще границу закрыли, и даже водители остались, которые и все, не могут. Не выехать никуда, бросают, сидят.
Ну вот, мы обои водители. Ну, у меня своя машина.
Вы водите такси или автобус?
Я с такси ушел. На
Это я
дядю.
водитель автобуса был в Калининграде, работал 30 лет на дорожке. А сюда все, на пенсию. Тут даже и некуда, нету работы.
Да, там
Зажиточный
мало.
городок был, ни в чем не нуждался. Все было.
Все было.
Все было.
I'm currently in the town of Gusev with the population of 30,000 people. This town is being actively renovated, so we'll probably see a number of pretty well developed places. There is an old Russian tradition to hang locks on some kind of constructions, on bridges, on such artificial metal trees to symbolize solidity of marriage. But funny fact that 80% of Russian couples eventually break up, so 80% of this lock are now or in the nearest future will be irrelevant. An interesting monument which is called the bayonet attack. If you look on the rifle of this soldier, it has a bayonet that can be used additionally if, for example, a soldier is run out of ammunition, so he can't shoot, he can only use this bayonet to kill the enemy. And it seemed to be widely used during the First World War, particularly in this battle of Gumbenen. That's the old name of this town, German name of Gusev.
I didn't explore the city of Gusev thoroughly and visited only a couple of its attractions. Then I went to a hidden corner of the Kaliningrad region to see one of the railway sites.
This was the railway that ran across Kaliningrad region to Poland. This railway had one very peculiar viaduct. Also, the railway itself is not super scenic. You can still find some interesting rails produced, for example, in 1943, in the years of the war. The rail itself was built in 1943, but a part that connects cross-tie with the rail in 1913, 30 years earlier. The railway workers have just told me that it's likely that trains still run here. Rails, they are not rusty, they're slightly glancey, which means that sometimes some trains run here. You see, there are 4 rails, and these 2 rails in the middle are counter rails, and these 2 rails were designed to prevent the train from the derailment, not to let it move right or left when it's on the bridge. And these counter rails were produced in 1909, so usually these are just old rails that once were operational. As a measure of safety, the bridge is equipped with handrails, so you will not fall down. There is the river. It would be perfect to catch a train, but it's highly unlikely that something will roll here in 30 minutes. This is why it's called arch bridge. There are 5 arches and 4 pillars, the main part of the construction that support the bridge. It's very unusual for the residents of Kaliningrad region to see local roads that deserted, because in the past, when the borders with European Union were open, local roads were used as transit corridors and there was a constant flow of cars. But currently there is only inner traffic, like local traffic within the region, and that's it, so cars barely run here. And the last town that I'm going to explore today is called Chernyakhovsk. I can say that Chernyakhovsk is the geographical center of Kaliningrad. From here is more or less the same distance to both western and eastern parts of the region. I have a lot of questions to local development, because the sidewalls here at some point are barely walkable. The monument to the world-famous musician Pyotr Tchaikovsky is staying right next to the children's music school. In the past it was a German villa. In 60s of 20th century it was a residential building, and then later it was owned by the school. At some places that have experienced reconstruction, they also place some historical information about it. For example, this was the building of the Burgomaster, or basically the mayor of the city. But to be honest, there are very few examples when this information is represented for public. By European standards, this town might not look attractive, but remember guys that there are very few examples of such architecture in the country of Russia. They mostly concentrated here in Kaliningrad region, and the rest of the country is totally different in terms of architecture, in terms of cities planning and stuff. Old name of Chernyakhovsk was Insterburg, and Burg means castle, fortress. So this is Insterburg Castle, constructed in 1380. It was twice destroyed and burned out. In January 1945, Insterburg Castle was stormed and damaged by fire. After the end of the Second World War, a military unit was housed in the surviving buildings. Finally we see how these churches of Kaliningrad region should look. Wow, I'm so impressed. It's new day in Kaliningrad region, and I begin this day in the town of Sovetsk, which was known as Tilsit in the past. This town located on Russian-Lithuanian border, and it is mostly known for the Treaty of Tilsit that was signed in 1807 between Alexander I, Russian Emperor, and Napoleon, which was basically the official end of Napoleon War, and that agreement clarified the division of spheres of influence between France and Russia in Europe. Noticeable detail in many Russian cities, not necessarily in Sovetsk, is the ad of drugstores. So some drugstores advertise the job of a drug dealer, for example, drug courier, drug deliverer. They paint it literally on just city walls. They literally show their ad on facades of buildings, like here. In my opinion, drug market in Russia is a huge and massive corruption chain that potentially includes local authorities, because in some places this ad is hidden. You can't just walk around the city and find it in some random facades, but in some places it's everywhere, like here. So it's likely that local headquarters benefit from it at some point. Or maybe they are just too passive. I can't say that we are in outskirts of Sovetsk, we are pretty close to the city center. The condition of buildings here doesn't look promising. Also, I see a pretty nice quarter just on the next street, so let's go straight there. There is a lovely monument to Tilsit tram. Between 1901 and 1944 there used to be a tram system in the town of Tilsit. It was closed during the war, and since then has never been resumed. All of the tracks were disassembled, and only this monument is kind of the reminiscence from that time. However, this wagon never operated in the town of Sovetsk. It was constructed in St. Petersburg and delivered here specifically for the purpose of placing it here as a monument. And I guess that there is just some kind of a cafeteria right now. Okay, I guess correctly, so there is just like a coffee shop inside the tram. Вообще необычное сочетание, чтобы с одной стороны кофейня, а с другой продавались сыры. Здесь местное производство есть?
Да, в городе нема сыроварни.
My phone is getting crazy and constantly switches mobile network, and different networks have different time zones. Currently the time is 10:03, but Moscow time is 11. And Moscow time is the same time zone for Lithuania, which is in just a couple of kilometers from here. And yesterday, when I was just driving into the city, my smartphone connected to Lithuanian network and it showed me Lithuanian time. And then it just randomly switched to Kaliningrad one, so it's easy to get lost. It used to be an ordinary street with car traffic, but they converted it into pedestrian precinct, such a Soviet street illumination pillar. Wow, at first I thought that it was a military base, but apparently it's just an open-air exhibition of military equipment and different vehicles, like tanks, helicopters. I don't know what's that, some artillery stuff. It would be more funny if they placed this exhibition right on the riverbank to let Lithuanians see it from their side. I definitely underestimated how massive military helicopters are. You can compare it with the house on the background. It's 3-story block. Previous generation of fighter aircraft, Su-24. I think that currently they use 34. Right now we are in super exclusive place. There is the actual border between Russia and Lithuania. This is the river Neman, and there is Lithuania. There is completely different world. That's European Union. This is Russia. Completely different legislation. Minds of politicians. I'm actually quite surprised that Russians did not turn this area into highly militarized one. They did not create some kind of the neutral zone or something like it exists between northern and southern Cyprus. Oh, by the way, I see a person walking across the bridge. There is the actual border crossing between Russia and Lithuania. And again, to get there, I would need either a residence permit in one of the European Union countries, or student visa or something, maybe working visa. could also work, but I can't enter this territory even having tourist Schengen visa. And also a funny fact that being connected to a Russian mobile network, I have to use VPN to access Instagram. But I can also connect Lithuanian network even being here because the connection is strong, it's coming from there, and I wouldn't need to use VPN to access Instagram. Again, different worlds. Such a lovely fountain with Soviet mosaics. There must be 12 of these mosaics, and each mosaic is devoted to a certain month of the year apparently. It says January, February, Soviet abstractions. Closer view to the border bridge across the Neman River. It was built in 1907 and blown up in 1944 during the Second World War. But soon it was rebuilt in 1947. And since then it serves as the border crossing between Lithuania and Russia. I went under a bridge over the river to take a piss and accidentally found the foundation of the old bridge that was located right under the current one. That must be the most unexpected thing in this journey. There is the drawbridge next to me and it's being opened. This is an old German bridge which is now opened, so it's likely that some vessel is going to sail across it. I don't know what's going on, but bridge is closing again. It seems that they just checked the mechanisms that are responsible for its opening. Otherwise, I see no sense to open it. I've just discovered that they simply tested opening mechanisms of the bridge, and I was so lucky to see it. It happens so infrequently. So obviously this bridge is German, and these mechanisms are located underneath the bridge and probably in this kind of the cabins. Brewery that was constructed in 1840, and this brewery was even working in the USSR. After the occupation of Königsberg region, when the war ended, some German brewery masters remained here and they taught Russian masters how to produce beer. It seems that some restoration works started, and maybe there is going to be a museum of brewery. Achievement unlocked! This is my 7th day in Kaliningrad region. I have already spent a week here, and today I decided to explore the coastline of Baltic Sea. We are currently in the town of Svetlogorsk, famous resort of Kaliningrad region. In the past, Svetlogorsk was called Rauschen, which is reflected in some architectural details, like this painting. It's just a nice area to walk around at chill pace. There is a lot of restaurants and cafeterias there you can take a seat and eat something delicious.
I would say that the landmark of Svetlogorsk is not the cold Baltic Sea, but the villas of the German elite of the pre-war era, preserved due to the fact that the city was almost not damaged during the East Prussian operation of the Soviet troops in 1945. It's worth going to Svetlogorsk for a relaxed pastime to be surrounded by ancient architecture and cozy forest parks. Residents of Europe, especially Western Europe, are unlikely to be surprised by this, because for them such a picture is pretty familiar. Nevertheless, the Kaliningrad region in general and its western side in particular have become a popular destination for internal emigration of Russians. The population of Svetlogorsk over the past 10 years has increased by almost 60%, from 10,000 people to 16,000, and people have been moving here most actively in recent years.
The tourist guy nearby just told me that the funicular that used to operate here was dismantled just because there was nobody who could maintain it. Just nobody could. And Soviets didn't even try to invite somebody to this place to maintain the funicular. They just destroyed it and then replaced to probably some cheaper option in form of this cableway. I believe it's easier to maintain. There is the process of getting off the cap. So there is the helper, the worker, who opens the door and let people go. By the way, this area is known for the fact that amber is mined here. It's often used in jewelry and also in the production of some chemicals like soap, for example. So you can buy different souvenirs made of amber here. Kaliningrad region is famous for amber industry, and here in the town of Yantarny, that might be translated as amber wheel, which means that somewhere here is the quarry, the industry where amber is produced. And that is exactly the place where I'm heading to right now. Wow, look at this monstrous Soviet mosaic! This monument is actually the welcoming sign of this town of Yantarne.
Amber is the fossilized resin of ancient trees, mainly pine and legumes. Amber is used mainly for making jewelry. Baltic amber is the most common type of amber, found along the shores of a large part of the Baltic Sea. To the east of the village of Yantarne, there is a huge amber quarry. About 90% of the world's amber reserves are concentrated in this area.
There is excavator bucket of a pretty decent size, we can even get in here, and there is still a lot of place. I bet it can place 15 or maybe even 20 persons. And there is the imitation of amber shaft. They had these tiny wagons, they loaded it with amber and manually transport. Вот мы находимся в янтарной пирамиде. Что это за конструкция?
Эта пирамида, она концентрирует, видимо, всякие, благополучные силы, да, потому что, давайте так скажем, да, вот, и физиология, и где-то биометрия, много очень, и все это, опускается на вас, и вы в этом находитесь сейчас, и благодаря вот этой вот, такой технологической форме, так скажем.
I have already shown you a number of monuments and memorials devoted to the Second World War, to the victims, to some fightings, but also, despite the fact that this territory no longer belongs to Germany, there are still some German memorials, monuments and stuff. Right now I'm entering German Memorial Cemetery in the town of Primorsk, also known as Fischhausen. More than 100 of German soldiers buried here, mass graves in Germany marked by these 3 Catholic crosses. On the information board of this cemetery it was said that this cemetery was for victims of the Second World War, like from 41 to 45. But look what I found. The cross to the person buried in 1857, almost a century before the war started. Well, I just checked the random desk and noticed that there is a lot, lots of names of very young people, like born in 1923, even born in 16. They didn't even reach the age of 30. Every war is fucking bullshit. Alright, it's me in Kaliningrad, and today I'm visiting another town, a resort town located on Baltic Sea. It is called Zelenogradsk, and I'm going to take the train to get there. So I'm currently at the northern railway station of Kaliningrad, waiting for the local train that will get me there. The western part of Kaliningrad region is definitely way more developed in terms of the railway system, because trains run more frequently here than in southern and eastern part. So you can take trains wherever you want. Also, trains here are almost twice cheaper than buses, so it's also a way to save some money. We are leaving Kaliningrad. Right now I'm paying a visit to Curonian Spit, a natural landmark of Kaliningrad region. Just look at this forest. Most of trees here are inclined right, and it caused by wind, which is permanently blowing here from Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea is just 40 meters ahead. The Soviet lighthouse. I say Soviet because I didn't see such constructions of lighthouse elsewhere. This one was built in 1982. I'm not sure if it's operational or not. All of the cafes that are located around this lighthouse do not show its real shape. They show the classic stereotypical form of lighthouse, but not this one. And here is the sea. Technically this is the east coast of Baltic Sea, but west coast of this Spit. It's not waving heavily right now, but wind is pretty strong. Very end of spring, late May. The air temperature is 18 degrees Celsius, water temperature is 14 degrees. So it's pretty far to the swimming season, which begins here in July and August. But even in July, the temperature of water reaches roughly more than 18 degrees Celsius. Old town of Zelenogradsk is being actively reconstructed. They create new pedestrian precincts, reconstruct buildings and paint new murals, like this one, devoted to local cats. Somehow it became a landmark of the town. This is certainly the best condition of the water tower in Kaliningrad region. There is currently the museum of cats, which is kind of a weird stuff. I'm not interested in that. But also there is the panoramic point on top. That is the memorial to Zelenogradsk cats. I'm not sure why they became the local landmark, because so far I haven't seen a single cat. Wow, finally found a cat. What a beauty. Let's greet this guy. Hey, how are you doing? There are way less cats than in Istanbul, but Istanbul is way bigger than Zelenogradsk, obviously. Wow, there are some vending machines with food for cats, so you can feed numerous cats of Zelenogradsk, like this big one. Apparently locals are proud of their cats and they try to promote it as a tourist brand, so there are different details with the theme of cats, like graffitis, random art objects. Oh well, Mr. Lenin looks so surreal in this environment. Yeah, the vibes of Kaliningrad region are very different from the rest of Russia. Well, historically it's not Russia, and it was developed in times before Russia came here. So Zelenogradsk turned out to be beyond my expectations. It's a very nice place, and I see that it is maintained. Tourist infrastructure is being developed, road infrastructure, transportation. Look at these big bosses, like badass cats. Jesus, but Zelenogradsk Mafia. And now let's get straight to the embankment of Baltic Sea following this green alley. We are on Baltic Sea embankment in Zelenogradsk that has recently been rebuilt, reconstructed, and it lost its access to the sea. So currently you can only walk down this alley, this embankment, but you can't really reach the water. You see there was an old descent to the beach, and beach itself does not exist anymore, and also that descent, that staircase is closed. But also no, I'm saying shit, look, there is the beach. So seems that sunbathing season has already started for some people. A couple of girls has just swum into the sea, but fucking hell, the water is so cold. Zero desire to swim right now, plus it's windy. I do like how one pier is literally like laying on another one, and it creates such a specific perspective. Very interesting picture. Okay, we are on the edge of this pier, which is mostly occupied by local fishermen. That is open waters of Baltic Sea. And also I see some gas tanker on the horizon. Yeah, probably some liquefied gas is transported from Russia to maybe European Union, maybe some other countries across Baltic Sea.
The next day I went to Baltiysk, the westernmost city in Russia. Until the end of the 1990s, Baltiysk was a closed city. It was impossible to enter Baltiysk without a special permit because of its military importance, as it housed and still houses the largest Russian naval base on the Baltic Sea.
Welcome to Baltiysk, the westernmost Russian city. It is located 50 kilometers west of Kaliningrad on the coast of Baltic Sea. Among the residents of the town there must be a lot of seamen, not only military but also civilian ones, because here in Baltiysk there is a massive seaport, and let's say ferries from the mainland of Russia arrive here and depart. There is also some cargo traffic between Kaliningrad region and Russia, so it's a very important point in the region. Apparently it was largely destroyed during the Second World War. That's why we can find a lot of Soviet architecture here, like 50s, 60s, but also a number of German houses have been preserved. 100% Russians are obsessed with gardening. They can just plant stuff for fun, usually things like potato, carrot, cabbage. They often plant some random flowers in their backyards. And there are mass graves of German soldiers died in the Second World War. There is the actual memorial, 3 massive crosses, 2 Catholic ones and 1 Orthodox in the middle. We are in the very strategically important point of Kaliningrad region. This is the marine entrance to Kaliningrad Bay. So all of the ships that end up in Kaliningrad and in Baltiysk, so basically all of the ships that supply this region, all of the naval ships sail across this kind of strait. So there is the beginning of Baltic Strip that stretches up to Polish border and then further to the area of Gdańsk. Wow, there is such an interesting military construction which looks like a water tower, but in fact it was a part of artillery system. There is a ferry boat that runs every 2 hours from Baltiysk to the Spit. So we are on the ferry. It transfers both passengers and vehicles. The journey is gonna take 10 minutes. The ferry was cheap, it costed me just 70 rubles, something like 90 US cents. So it's also very popular among tourists, maybe some locals as well. I've just seen a group of school students who are likely to go there on some kind of a guided tour, because there is a lot of objects remained after the Second World War, some German objects as well that I'm going to explore. And yeah, obviously that other people would like to see it as well, not only me. Look at the name of this ferry, it's called Vistula, and Vistula is the actual name of this spit. So Baltic Spit is a Russian version of originally Polish name Vistula. So in Poland it is called Vistula Spit, and also in English language as well. Alright, the journey begins. We are living in Baltiysk. That is the breakwater of the harbor in Baltiysk. They placed the lighthouse here. We are in the strait, the Baltic Strait right now. There is the local seaport on the left. We are at the place. It's high time for disembarking. The journey took just 5 minutes, and yeah, the exit is gonna be from the front part of the vessel. There is quite a lot of passengers. Likely that some students visited local museum or something. I don't know, there are dozens of them. Wow, I've just understood just now that this is a part of Baltiysk. So it's like a residential area. So some people, and they take this ferry boat almost daily. The former Luftwaffe airfield, which was called Neutiv. We are entering its territory. It housed German air forces until 1945, and then it was turned into Soviet military base and used this airfield until 1995. So for 4 years of the modern Russia it was also operational, but then it was abandoned, closed. Neutiv airfield had 2 heated runways, a hydro harbor, 3 reinforced concrete aircraft hangars, and 2 metal hangars for auxiliary equipment. Luftwaffe units were based at the airfield. In the post-Soviet war years, the airfield was operated by the Air Force of the Navy of the USSR. And since 1995, the airfield began to fall into complete decline. It must have been either entrance checkpoint or the building of headquarters, or maybe like a dispatcher tower of the airport. There is one of the 3 reinforced concrete hangars, the rest 2 are located nearby. Apparently in the past there used to be massive metal gates that do not exist anymore because they were sent to scrap metal. This hangar is huge, I guess from its entrance to the opposite wall that's gonna be something like 30, maybe 40 meters, which is significant. I think it just became dangerous to exploit all of these hangars, that's why they were abandoned. And as soon as there was no place to store aircrafts, the whole airfield was abandoned. So that is a western fort of Baltiysk. It was constructed in 1871. 3 caponiers were located along the front for conducting flank or oblique fire in 2 opposite directions. From the rear, the fort was protected by a moat, over which a drawbridge was thrown. In the gorge part, there was a 2-tier guard barracks with a storage room on the lower level, a gorge caponier, a platform for building of a guard, a well, a sewerage system, and 3 warehouses. Wow. The ruins of Western Fort do not look promising. Will definitely be just washed away by Baltic Sea in, I don't know, in a couple of decades. Right now I'm walking down a mole. This is a massive structure. It's used as a pier, breakwater, or a causeway, separating 2 bodies of water. This is the southern mole of Baltic Strait. It's kind of a gateway of this strait. This is the lighthouse on southern mole in Baltiysk, one of the westernmost points of Russia. Well, probably not the westernmost, because at least there is another mole, northern mole. It's slightly more western, but doesn't really matter anyway. Even if there are some western, like more western points on this spit, doesn't really matter. So we've reached this meaningful point. This is the actual end of the mole, so I'm currently staying on one of the massive stones, a part of this breakwater construction. Okay, just visited the lighthouse, and now let's check how fast can I walk, because it's 20 minutes before the departure of the ferry boat, and maps says that it's 25 minutes walk, and the next ferry is gonna be in 2 hours.
I returned from Baltiysk to Kaliningrad by freight train. You can watch the train hopping part of the journey on my Patreon page by following the link on the screen or the link in the description of the video. In Kaliningrad, I had some free time, which I decided to spend on exploring the local slums.
There is one peculiar location southwest of Kaliningrad, which is rarely discussed. This is Kaliningrad Favelas. That's the exact place where I'm currently walking to. Logistically, this place is not that far from city center. It only takes 15 minutes by bus to get to, let's say, southern railway station of Kaliningrad. It's accessible by public transport, and that's how I got here, basically. Okay, we are entering the actual territory of Favelas. There is some water in front of us, and this is the water of Kaliningrad Bay of Baltic Sea. There are some cats and such interesting houses. So originally, I guess they were just like garages for vehicles, maybe for some boats as well, but then they were turned into a residential area. So they constructed some new rooms. So the reason why I call this place favelas is because it's chaotic architecture. As you can see, many of favelas have their personal piers, like this one, and access to their personal garages, where they most likely store boats. Somebody have even pretty reasonable vessels. I mean, not just like small fishing boats like this one, but also some kind of small yachts. Also, comparing to favelas that we are used to, like the ones in South America, this place is obviously way safer. So it's some kind of the suburbia of Kaliningrad. I see no reason for crime to develop here, so it's just like an area with private houses with access to the water, so it should be fairly safe here. Well, some of the houses here look slightly dilapidated, but some are pretty good and decent. Yeah, so in the past these were just like garages for vehicles, for cars, then they were turned to living areas. Real estate here must be cheaper than in apartments or than in cottages. А здесь раньше просто были гаражи, получается?
Да,
для лодок или для
да,
автомобилей?
Было раньше гаражное общество, сейчас поставили лодки.
У многих домах подвалы под лодку.
А как так получилось, что сюда люди начали приезжать и вот так застраивать все?
Если честно, мы тут долго живем.
Мы тут года 3, наверное, да.
2-3 года мы максимум тут живем, мы сами толком не знаем.
А вы сами из Калининграда сюда
Да,
приехали?
да.
А что вас побудило сюда поехать?
От
У него
родни.
тут мама живет.
От родни, да, от бабушки. Свое жилье, можно так сказать.
А в целом здесь дешевле,
Конечно.
можно обзавестись жилплощадью, чем в городе?
Конечно.
Конечно, да.
Тебе
Тут
тут
и
попроще,
коммунальные
тебе
услуги дешевле.
попроще платить коммуналку, попроще типа за свет, за газ. Вот это вот
Единственное,
всё
надо
платить.
приходится покупать газ и дрова на зиму.
Как здесь с транспортной доступностью?
Все хорошо, можно, ты спокойно можешь и в Болт-район выехать, и в центр, в центральный район, в Ленинградский можешь спокойно выехать.
В том числе на общественном транспорте, да?
Да.
Но в целом вам здесь нравится, ну раз уж вы сюда
Конечно,
переехали.
Конечно.
Да, а у вас...
Спокойно, нету такого, типа, как в городе. То, что выходишь и пиздец как.
This street, these houses, is like a mix of Italian Palermo and Russian Voronezh, which means we are in Kaliningrad. Well, this is the entrance to Kaliningrad Bay, and it seems that they have their own system of canals and lakes. Yeah, it's a nice and peaceful place, even with some infrastructure. So I can imagine people moving here even from Kaliningrad. It's not that bad. So they have their own grocery store, bus stop is pretty close. They have some waterways as well, so they can use boats and yachts to navigate. It's just a pretty chilly and lovely place, so that's why a lot of people move here for this kind of a chill pace.
Thank you for watching this video. My exploration of the Kaliningrad region is over. From Kaliningrad I took a flight home, as it was the most convenient way to get out of the region. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave your comments. Also, remind you that on my Patreon page you will be able to find photos, videos and other content from my travels which is not published on YouTube. The link to my Patreon profile is mentioned both on the screen and in the description of this video. See ya!